Hey everyone, my name is Ali Serag, and welcome to the ETH San Fran Flow hacking stream. I'm going to talk a little bit about what Flow is all about and why it's super awesome and exciting. But before I get into that, I want to talk about our prize pools and the themes for hacking with us. First one we're looking for is what is the most killer app potential product that's going to be built here, right? So this is a very broad stream. What I want you to think is, how can I create a solution using blockchain that solves a massive real pain for as many people as possible? If you look at the example of ChatGPT, AI has existed for decades, but ChatGPT was pretty much the first mainstream consumer product that opened up that value proposition to millions of everyday people. And as a result, it became one of the fastest adopted products in history, right? All of a sudden, your grandmother, your friend, anyone had access to this life-changing technology. You could get recipes, you could prepare for exams, you could do a whole plethora of different applications with it. What does that look like for Web3? What we're inviting you to essentially paint a picture of what the future looks like and how a massive challenge that lots of people face can be solved, and create a product that would be adopted by millions of people, right? What is that next breakthrough? Why are you the right people to build it, and what does it look like? The second major stream is the best sports app built on Flow. So if you weren't already aware, Flow is really the world's leading blockchain in terms of sports ecosystem development. We have the largest products such as NBA Top Shot, which has already seen over $2 billion in transactions, as well as NFL All Day, Keeper, which is the world's largest digital collectibles for female soccer players, and a plethora of other sports apps, digital collectibles, etc. There's already these massive communities on the network that are engaging in consumer applications in the sports stream. We want in this stream to invite you to dream about what the future of sports looks like. There's a lot of different areas and use cases that this could fall under, from like making better sports predictions that are more transparent and fraud resistant, to play to earn games, AI fantasy leagues. How do you increase fan engagement? You can do things like, tokenize assets in stadiums, equipment, team shares, fractional ownership. And you could also, get fans engaging in new and exciting ways, by continuing to support the teams and players that they love the most. There's a huge plethora of new wearables and biometric data being available. How could players own that more? How could we create more transparent and equitable systems in terms of gender pay gaps that exist in sports? And how could we support funding up and coming new players in different verticals that might be missed by major leagues or teams, or live in rural areas that without funding they would never put their talents to use. These are just a couple examples of areas you might look in. We invite you to be super creative and really dream with us about what the future looks like. What we're looking for overall when you're doing your presentations and when you're pitching in any of our streams is, we really want you to visually show how the world used to look like before your product came into being, before your hackathon solution. What is that pain? Articulate what the pain is that you've solved, why that matters, how many people that's going to impact. You could also put a numerical value, like how many billions are saved or billions are made. Like, what is the impact of the product you're making? What does the future look like as a result of it? And why Web3? Like, does the application or product you're creating really need blockchain? And if it does, like, why is your solution creative or effective? And how does blockchain actually resolve that pain in an effective way? Lastly, we have a couple more substreams in terms of feedback. You're going to get rewarded if you submit some suggestions on how we could improve our documentation, workflows, any challenges or issues you ran into while developing. Any things like, oh, I couldn't find this contract, or this was a little bit confusing, this took a little bit of time. We want to hear it. We're all about continuous improvement, and we want to reward you for sharing that feedback with us. Um, yeah, so super excited to have you hack with us, and let's build the future of sports and killer apps together. A little bit about myself. I work on product at the Flow Foundation, and previously I was a founder of various startups across fintech and DeFi. So, what is Flow? The architecture, safety, and sustainability, as well as the future of Web3 development, is essentially what's on the agenda for today. Under that, I'm going to talk about transactions, protocol level primitives such as verifiable randomness functions and account abstraction. Don't worry, if you're not familiar with those terms, I'll dig into what they really mean. Talk about modding for Web3, what that implies and what that unlocks, metadata for tokens, and access control. All of these things that are uniquely offered by the Flow blockchain to developers building on it. Before jumping in, let's start off with a little bit of a story. Imagine that, this is the first time you'd ever heard about blockchain or Web3. You're not a developer. Your friends are playing a video game and they tell you about it. And it sounds super exciting. They want you to join. Just put yourself in the shoes of an everyday, ordinary person that hasn't gone down the rabbit hole. As soon as they go to the landing page for this website, they see, all right, connect wallet. All right, what does that mean? Is that how I log in? All right, I click on that. Okay, wait, I need to download a plugin in Chrome. All right. Okay, wait, they're telling me to memorize this list of words. All right, let me start writing that down in Apple Notes. Oh wait, it's telling me not to write it down on my computer. All right, let me find a piece of pen and paper and note it. Oh wait, where do I find? Okay, all right, I got all that done. Now what? I'm trying to play. All right, I connect my wallet. Like, why am I connecting my wallet? Like, why does it need my bank account info? What is this? All right, wait. Now I can't do anything in this app unless I have gas. What is gas? Is that like taxes? Like, where do I get that from? Oh, there's centralized exchanges. This Perplexity AI tells me, all right, I'm gonna go to one of those. Oh wait, what? Why am I on a call for the last 3 hours with my bank's fraud department? What's going on here? Is this a scam? The reason I gave that, analogy is because the reality of the situation is that there are still major barriers for everyday consumers and mainstream users to interact with even basic Web3 applications. So something as simple as a game, instead of, spending 1 minute to start playing with your friends, onboarding could take hours, if not days. And the vast majority of people, at least if they're like me, are likely to drop off before they even play the game because, ain't nobody got no time for that. At the protocol level, what Flow offers builders is the tools that they need to effortlessly remove all the barriers that both developers and the users using what the developers are creating might face. Does your grandmother really know what a crypto wallet is? Does your friend really need to buy gas to interact with the application? Well, on Flow, you can do things like walletless onboarding and create those types of experiences so that you could log into a Web3 application just using your email. While you're stuck on gas, you could also create gasless experiences easily, which I'm going to touch upon in just a bit. Flow allows you as a builder to do all of this while also allowing for a full spectrum of ownership that is always in the hands of the end user. Before I get into how all of that and more works, let's discuss what exactly Flow is. Well, Flow is a layer 1 blockchain with ultra low gas fees that first launched its proof of stake protocol in 2020. It was co-founded by Dieter Shirley, one of the brightest minds in the space and a core contributor to ERC 721, better known as the NFT, a term that he actually coined. There are currently 2 virtual machines, or VMs, that run on Flow. One is Cadence and one is EVM. EVM was recently introduced during Crescendo, which is the largest upgrade that's ever occurred on the network. And what it essentially does is it allows Flow to become EVM equivalent, meaning that Solidity contracts and popular EVM tooling like Hardhat, Alchemy, Open Zeppelin contracts, Remix, all of these tools that most of us are familiar with, they work seamlessly off the bat on Flow. No additional configuration required. It's as easy and seamless as building on any Ethereum L2 while still being an L1 and having all the benefits of it, right? So you don't need to have extensive technical experience, but you do get extensive technical advantages. And these advantages make creating the next new generation dApps possible. Flow is also home to some of the world's most exciting projects, the people that are really trying to move the needle in experiences that people can interact with on chain, such as Disney, Mattel, NFL, NBA, tons of DeFi projects, gaming projects, RWA projects, and is powering these dApps that are actually interacted with by millions of users every single day. In other words, Flow is the home of consumer applications that everyday people use and love. So, what makes it unique? Before we get into that, a blockchain is essentially owned by a multitude of computers known as nodes. These nodes are responsible for validating and recording transactions. Depending on the blockchain's architecture, nodes can have specific roles and responsibilities, such as validating transactions, storing data, or creating new blocks. These nodes are crucial in maintaining the integrity, security, and decentralization of a blockchain network. In the industry, when many of us think about scaling, L2s and app chains tend to come to mind. Flow has created a unique network architecture that allows it, as an L1, to scale without the need for sharding. On most other chains, the norm is for all nodes to perform every single task, like an army of clones in the exact same way. As networks usage soars and grows, the transaction processing capacity of the individual nodes becomes a limiting factor, restricting the network's throughput and latency. The amount of data that can be stored on-chain is inherently limited since nodes have only a finite storage capacity. The only real way to scale these monolithic blockchains is by increasing the capacity of each node by adding even more CPU, more memory, and more storage. However, this has a cost, and that cost is decentralization. As nodes scale vertically, they become more expensive to run, and eventually only a few operators. Even worse, energy consumption for every single node in the network increases over time, making the chain environmentally unsustainable. The monolithic node design of common L1s such as Bitcoin and Ethereum overly privileges operator control over block production. This makes the chain vulnerable to censorship and MEV attacks. The problem gets even worse in L2s with centralized sequencers. Flow's multi-role architecture provides MEV resistance by randomly assigning transactions to collection nodes that only see a subset of all transactions. What do I mean by multi-role architecture? Essentially, Flow divides tasks among specialized node types to enhance scalability and efficiency. On node, because the increase in energy and hardware consumption over time is restricted to a small subset of nodes in the network, this drastically limits the environmental footprint of the chain. The overall energy use of Flow won't increase significantly, even if the activity increases by 10, 50, 100x, or even more, making the per transaction energy footprint decrease over time. Now, I mentioned two different VMs. Now, Cadence is not only a virtual machine, it's also a name, and it's the name of the Flow native programming language. In Web3, we build applications that constantly work with resources or assets such as fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens, and 100 of other ERCs out there. Cadence was purpose-built as a resource-oriented programming language, designed with user experience, safety, and functionality in mind. You can essentially use Cadence to extend your EVM application that's written in Solidity and unlock extremely powerful value propositions. Over the next few slides, I'll try to give an overview in as short time as possible of some of the most exciting things you can unlock on Flow by combining Cadence with your application. And this is completely up to you. Again, because Flow is EVM equivalent, that means that you don't even have to touch Cadence at all. You could literally take your Solidity smart contracts and within seconds get them up and running on Flow just like that. We call this EVM++. And like I was saying, EVM on Flow enables Cadence to superpower your existing Solidity code. This brings many of the security and developer benefits of Cadence to Solidity, enabling you as a developer to more easily build secure and powerful software on EVM. Cadence assets are also compatible with EVM apps on Flow and vice versa, meaning existing EVM assets on Flow gain from what's possible in Cadence, and Cadence assets get to participate in the ecosystem of EVM apps and tooling. The transaction model is super exciting on Flow, and it differs from the EVM in certain ways. So on Cadence, transactions allow people to write data directly on chain, and Flow offers both competitive transaction times, which is important for apps like games and DeFi, but also offers different types of transactions in a completely new model. So this is on the Cadence side. The model breaks down signer roles into the proposer, the payer, and authorizer. So you can separate the payer of the app being the application and the proposer as well as authorizer being the end user. This unlocks some very exciting things like sponsored transactions, where you can specify who the payer of the gas is, an approver, and essentially the end user doesn't pay any gas fees but gets to interact with the application. This is great for onboarding, consumer and mainstream users. And we've seen cases like NBA Top Shot that's managed to really onboard millions of users that don't even know that the application they're using is powered by Web3. Seamless. Another thing that you unlock are bundled transactions, which allow you to add multiple transactions together to execute in a specified order. If one of them fails, then everything reverts. This is really useful when you have a complex transaction that might rely on the results of the previous transactions in a sequence. There's also multi-sig transactions require a signature to have multiple signers in order to execute, which is kind of valuable for things like peer-to-peer trading and escrows, things like that. There's also scripted transactions where you can specify execution preconditions and postconditions. Super cool for things like adaptive yield farming strategies that become possible, that change based on new inputs of data that get unlocked in real time. An important thing to note about sponsored transactions, which I kind of alluded to already, is that on Flow, gas fees are so low that many applications decide to fully sponsor all transactions of all their users. So it's a completely gasless onboarding experience end to end, and it's really unparalleled. We've seen applications more than 4x their users just by integrating this into their app, right? So it's something really exciting. And the two barriers that I alluded to at the very beginning of this, challenges with getting a wallet as well as gas, they both get completely obliterated. I'll talk about wallets and account abstraction in a bit, though. On Flow, there are also protocol level primitives. What do I mean by that? Cadence has built-in account abstraction, and essentially the Cadence account model enables each account to function as its own multisig, enabling secure transaction authorization and account recovery. It also allows for account linking, which is essentially shared ownership over accounts. You can think of account linking like Google Drive folders and permission accessing. An app can start off with owning an account, which a normal everyday person uses without having to install a wallet or memorize a key phrase. And months later, once the user goes further down the rabbit hole and creates their own non-custodial wallet, they could essentially link it as well as all the assets within it into their mother wallet, just like how you might create a Google Drive folder that you and your friend have access to, and then there's a subfolder within that you give access to someone else. Think of it just moving a Drive folder into another folder that only you have access to, right? Another protocol level primitive other than account abstraction, which is really noteworthy, is Flow's on-chain randomness or VRF function. Within literally minutes, you can get up and running with generating a random number and accessing it for free on-chain. This is a lot easier than using oracles or other tools for getting VRF, and it's a lot more secure, right? The value that is created is inherently provably fair. And games and lotteries don't really, that would use random numbers, right? They don't really need to rely on third parties anymore, which de-risks them. You can access this randomness directly in Solidity by referencing a special pre-compiled Solidity contract called the Cadence Arc. Attachments. So attachments essentially offer the ability to add extra data and functionality without permission from the original contract author. You could think of this like modding for Web3. If we look at, say, how Warcraft 3 and their editor allowed for new games that were even more popular than them, such as like Dota and League of Legends, to get created, that literally shot to the top one. Inspired by mods like Defense of the Ancients, which if you played that game or remember back in the day was super popular. Another example is Skyrim. You can go to websites like Nexus Mods and see billions of mods continue to be downloaded, right? By composing on top of existing software, by making it easy to compose and extend functionality, extend features, what you do as a product is you turn your product into a platform. And that platform continuously evolves. You empower your community to create more and more value on top of that base application, right? And even today, people are still creating mods, integrating AI like ChatGPT as well as Whisper AI to make, multi-dimensional NPCs in games like Skyrim, things that the original creators at Bethesda would never have imagined. And they stopped pushing codes years ago, but still new value propositions, new levels, new characters are being developed, right? Web3, inherently requiring all code to be an open source, is a massive opportunity to create a fully composable software development experience. And attachments are unique functionality and cadence that allows you to extend that functionality and add extra data seamlessly. This is really cool for things in gaming, like gear represented as nestled NFTs that offer perks or mini games. Think about Gwent in Witcher 3, new biomes, levels, talent trees. Decentralized science, you could have independently verifiable academic papers and verified citations. If you think of like all of academia as just one body or one contract that people are constantly attaching more reviews to or more works that they themselves also have attachments, etc. It also has application across DeFi and SocialFi with news fact checking and so on. You could see this with an attachment, this little icon that appears under a Web3 SocialFi application that says, oh, this has been verified by 500 people. You can trust this information. Metadata views. Metadata views essentially allow for future proofing and interoperability while guaranteeing backward compatibility. It's essentially adding metadata to assets in Cadence, such as a non-fungible token. And you could do cool things like specify that, the creator of this NFT is this address, and this is the percentage of royalties they should get paid out. So it doesn't matter which marketplace that NFT ends up being listed on. All of them read from that exact same metadata, know exactly which creator should get paid and how much should get paid out. This is really exciting because long after you launch the contract, you could continually add more optional metadata or fields to the metadata in the asset, right? And so in the future, as new norms start being created or new standards, maybe there's a metaverse marketplace that gets launched and specific requirements for how assets are visualized. You can specify unique characteristics of your assets and specify how they should be used in those applications and with those new standards and comply with them, right? So it's really future-proofing the assets that you create today so that they continue working long into the future and they're adaptable. Some of the examples that this is useful for is gaming, where you could get attributes of gear, could help with SEO, DAOs with information about governance tokens, voting privileges, DeSci, where you could associate papers with specific journals and cities, DeFi, where you could have NFT yield perks, where anyone who holds this NFT, essentially when they start yield farming or doing this, they get a bonus or a buff, right? As well as a lot of other options. Another exciting functionality in Cadence is capabilities. And you could think of capabilities as granular access permissioning that is very similar to AWS IAM, if you're familiar with that. It essentially allows resources, functions, assets to have references to those shared objects, which can be saved for future transactions. So you could do things like grant, revoke, limit access. Really, really exciting, gives you a lot of options to do many, many, many different things. And that's why it is called capabilities. A couple examples. You could have gaming where you could lend out gear overnight or while on vacation. You could set up guild administration for different players. You can create an inheritance trust fund where you could use capabilities that unlock access to the funds after a certain amount of time has passed and there's been no transactions in the account. And maybe the funds are unlocked by first the attorney and then like, your next of kin, things like that, right? Also with SocialFi, this is really cool because it can unlock a lot of traditional business models, whether it's freemium models or subscription models that unlock certain access to the contracts and functionality and assets depending on your current status and what permissions you should have access to at any given time. So what does the future look like? Where Flow is now is Flow has a massive worldwide developer and user base. There's about 45 million users, and it's processed over 600 million transactions with 440 nodes in over 20 countries around the world on every major continent, except for Antarctica. Not exactly yet. You are joining a movement that's happening right now. That movement is to enable everyday users as well as developers like yourselves towards creating applications that remove barriers to people and create magical experiences, towards creating real consumer applications. You could think of it similarly to how ChatGPT was one of the largest adopted applications in history. It's one of the largest adopted products in tech. And AI had existed for many decades prior to ChatGPT's emergence, right? Like LLMs have existed, generative AI models have existed, lots of these things existed, but they were outside the hands of everyday consumers, everyday people. What ChatGPT did was it created a interface, a consumer application that unlocked the value of that technology for billions of people. Your grandmother could look up recipes. Your brother could figure out how to develop a video game on it. You could help ask questions to prepare you for upcoming exams in schools. It was one of the most versatile and impactful applications that came out, built on a technology that's been around for quite a bit of time, right? By focusing on everyday consumers, by putting ourselves in their shoes, by figuring out what their real pains are and how we could leverage technology to solve them, we could really change what future looks like and what tomorrow looks like. And I want to invite you during this hackathon to join us in shaping that narrative and shaping that future and be ambitious in what we're trying to solve, while at the same time thinking about what the real pains are. What are people really suffering from? Am I solving a pain, or am I just doing something that's kind of like fun to build? And I would challenge you towards solving real challenges that exist for us.